time for Lykken on Lending.
Welcome, everybody. Good to have you with us.
Welcome to Lykken on Lending, a weekly mortgage market update providing up-to-the-minute information on interest rates, loan programs, and hot industry news, all related to the mortgage industry. Brought to you by Transformational Mortgage Solutions. To participate in today's program, our guest call-in line is 646-716-4972. Now here's your host of Lykken on Lending, David Lykken.
Let's begin.
Welcome, listeners. I'm so excited to have Brittany Hodak as my guest today. She is an award-winning entrepreneur, author, customer experience speaker who has delivered keynote speeches across the globe to organizations such as American Express and even the United Nations. She has worked with some of the world's biggest brands and entertainers, including Walmart, Disney, Katy Perry, Dolly Parton, and you'll hear her talk about that in this interview. She founded and scaled an entertainment startup company to 8 figures before exiting, and she is the former chief experience officer for experience.com. We know them well and love that company. Her debut book, Creating Superfans, is what we're going to be talking about today. Listeners, back by popular demand, and that demand is me and many of you, and we're having Brittany Hodak back. She's in Franklin, Tennessee, in the Nashville area. And Brittany, it's great to have you back.
Thank you. It's so great to be back. I'm excited to be here.
You bet. Well, we're going to be talking about your new book, but I want to talk about your last podcast. We had you on December 23rd, 2019, and you were talking about the topic we're going to be talking about again today, and that is creating superfans. But you've got quite a background, and I think for those, we're going to put the link to everyone to go back so they can listen quickly, click on it and listen to your previous podcast. But for those that just want to say, well, who is she? And I will go back but tell me a little bit about yourself and share that with our listeners if you could. How'd you get to where you're at?
Yeah. Well, I can't believe it's been 3 years since we did this last time. Oh my gosh. I feel like the last 3 years, because of COVID, it's like time has bent in every direction. Like it feels like 3 months, but it also feels like 300 years. So it's such a weird thing, but wow, I would have definitely gotten it wrong if you'd asked me to guess how long it had been since we've done this.
I was shocked too. I couldn't believe it's been 3 years, but and so much was happening and it's happened since then, and which is probably reason this topic is more relevant now than ever before. But again, tell our listeners about your journey. I love your story of how you've gotten to where you're at. So condense it down quick.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Yes. Well, I grew up working in the entertainment industry. So I got my first job at a radio station when I was a teenager. I worked at record labels all through college and after school. I was in New York for more than a decade working for labels and big entertainment companies. And then when I was 27, I launched my own business called the Superfan Company. And in that business, I was working with huge superstars. I mean, I was so lucky. My first customer was Walmart, and that allowed me to work alongside people like Taylor Swift and Katy Perry and Dolly Parton and, just all of these huge celebrities and some of the biggest consumer packaged goods brands in the world. It was such a fun journey. I learned so much about customer experience, so much about the business side of relationships and, client relationships. So ran that business for almost a decade. And then by popular demand, I started speaking. I never dreamed of becoming a keynote speaker and author. It's honestly something I never even really thought about as a career path. But because of the success of the business and because of some big media appearances, including Shark Tank, I just kept getting all of these requests to speak. And as I did it, I realized that I really loved the learning and the researching and the going back to try to figure out what's driving this consumer behavior and what are the psychographics that are causing, some of these businesses to go viral and others to just go away. Like what is it about this human condition that makes us predisposed to connect more deeply to certain people or ideas or brands or things? So after a couple of years of sort of pulling double duty, doing both things, I sold the majority of the equity in the company that I had founded and instead started speaking and writing full time. And now all of these years later, I'm finally publishing my very first book today. It's called Creating Superfans, and it's all about the things that you can do, like an actual framework, step-by-step instructions that you can follow to turn your customers into lifelong advocates who come back again and again and tell their friends.
That is so good. And I love the pictures you sent of you and your daughter dressed up, and you had the book that you had dressed up for Halloween last year, on Halloween 2022. And it was just really cute. I mean, you are clearly have the ideas of an entrepreneur. You think like an entrepreneur. You are always into connecting with people. And I think I want to get into the whole super fan customer thing. How do we create those? Which is really one of my first questions. What is a super fan? Let's define that. So what is a super fan customer is a better way to say it. So what is a super fan customer, and why are they so important for any business, especially right now? Mortgage industry, we're struggling finding our super fans. They all kind of went away, it feels like.
Yeah, well, a super fan is really just a customer who creates more customers. It's someone who has such a great experience working with you that they're going to come back and tell their friends. And we know in the mortgage industry, what's the stat? Something like 4 in 5 people don't go back to the originator that they used last time when it's time for a new loan. And I think part of the reason why is because most people who work in the mortgage industry spend a hugely disproportionate amount of time on what I call the during part of the customer experience.
The during, D-U-R-I-N-G. The
yes,
during.
and the during part. And in the book, I talk about the idea of like before, during, and after. And because for a customer, your experience starts long before you first talk to somebody about your loan, right? The experience of looking for a loan begins when you first start to think about, oh, it's time to sell my house, or it's time to buy my first house, or it's time to upgrade, or I need a HELOC, or I need to, refi to like build this pool in this deck I've always wanted, whatever it is. Your journey starts long before you ever talk to the person who's ultimately going to be the partner that helps you on this journey. And it doesn't end when you close, right? Like after you close, there's so much. And I'm not just talking about that, like 30-year traditional loan. I'm talking about all of the things that happen for a customer, right? Like what happens after you close a loan? Well, first you start to get all of that like spammy predatory mail that is confusing because it's all designed to like make you think that somebody has your information. Then maybe you get paperwork in the mail that your loan has been sold to another company. And you're like, wait, what does this mean? Did I do something wrong? Is the person who did my loan still involved? Maybe this is fraudulent, like those other 52 things I've gotten in the mail in the past 2 weeks. And if you don't have somebody who's like still walking alongside you saying, hey, remember I told you could expect this, this is what it means. This is what it means for you. This is all totally normal. This is part of the process. Like if you don't have someone who's still right there engaged with you, then of course you're going to feel abandoned. Of course you're going to be like, well, why don't I just roll the dice next time? There's no way I'm going to have an experience that's more confusing than the one last time. So I might as well just pick any random person who promises me what a consumer thinks is the most important thing, which is the lowest rate, right? Because they don't know any better. So that during part of the transaction, like from the first time you communicate with somebody, whether that's over the phone or text or email through closing, that should only be like 60% of your consideration, because you're losing so many potential clients on that front end before you even know they exist. Like they're hearing your name, or they're landing on something, or they're like looking you up because you left them a voicemail because you're one of 17 people who bid on that lead. And they're like, yeah, no, there's not really anything that stands out about this person. So you've got to try to win them before you even know who they are in some cases. And then you've got to remind your customers that you're a trusted partner who still wants to be part of their financial journey long after that loan closes.
Wow, there is so many questions that come out of that, just that first statement that you're making. But let's go to this. How can mortgage professionals remain top of mind with their customers that they've already done business with after they've finished that journey, that initial journey? And then weave that into what you were talking about. The journey starts well before that. We want to get into that relationship as quickly as we can for the new customers that are coming down the line.
Yes. Well, so for existing customers, I always say to think about think about your own life. Think about you as a customer and think about the service professionals who you deal with. There are some who you only think of when you need that thing, right? You're like, oh, the toilet's broken, like call the plumber, right? There are others who you become almost friends with because your story becomes connected to theirs. Their thing is relevant to your thing. So you've got to become an expert and a helpful partner at more than just mortgages. And the thing is, you've already got things in your life that you're uniquely positioned to help other people with.
That is such a good point.
Yeah, like I'm not asking you to do anything new. I'm asking you to think about the gifts and the strengths that you have through a new lens. Like maybe you love to bake. Guess what? A lot of your customers would love someone to help them become better bakers. Maybe you love to garden. Guess what? All of those homes you just sold, a whole bunch of them come with front yards that people would love to add some curb appeal. You know, maybe you're the person who always knows when there's like a new show coming to town. You know all of the hot music before anybody else. Maybe you're so tacked into like all of the things that kids love to do. And you're the person that it's like, if you've got a family, we've got to stay connected because I'm going to make sure you never miss a fair, you never miss a parade, you never miss a little arts and crafts festival. So the interests that you have are going to resonate with a certain subset of your customers. Not everyone, and that's totally fine. But for the ones that do connect with you on that level, you now have this built-in way to continue to be relevant in their lives because everyone's busy. Like everyone has a zillion things going on. So when you can say, hey, I'm going to do this thing that's going to continue to make your experience in this new home even better because I'm going to keep you tapped into things that matter, whether they matter within the community or within your own home. That's like an ongoing value add. And that gives someone a reason to stay engaged with you beyond the closing table.
That's a really some good points in there. I want to come back to in just a minute, but you're talking a little bit about an experience. It's really about the experience we create with our customers. And sadly, the experience hasn't been all overly positive, at least for many at this point. What can mortgage professionals do to create an intentional experience and exceed expectations and then do so in other ways? Are there other ways? Talk about that.
There are other ways. And I love that you use the word intentional because here's the thing. We are living in an experience economy right now. I talk about this in the book. It is not a question of whether or not there will be an experience for your customer. There is. The question is it going to be an intentional one that you've thoughtfully designed and curated through those touch points that matter the most? Or is it going to be like a haphazard one that, you know, might be amazing sometimes and like not so great sometimes, and every now and then because balls get dropped or things fall through the cracks or whatever, it's like not so great. When you design an intentional experience for your customers and you say, here are the repeatable steps that every single customer goes through. Here are the touch points that are going to happen again and again and again. I know that on any loan, like these 17 things are always going to happen. Ask yourself, which of those matter the most? And what can you do to elevate those like ordinary interactions into memorable experiences?
Can you give us some examples of people that are doing this successfully that you have studied or looked at and go, that is well done? Give us an example.
Yeah. So one example that I really love that I talk about in the book comes from Legoland. So I don't know, Dave, have you ever been to the Legoland Hotel in Florida?
I have.
Awesome. Well, I took my first trip there in the summer of 2022. My kids were 2 and 4 at the time, and we stayed at the Legoland Hotel. We went to the theme parks. And one of my kids' favorite things about the hotel was an elevator that was like a disco dance party. You open this little elevator. There were floor to ceiling decals of Lego people. There was a disco ball. There were lights. And as soon as you closed the door, it would play like Bee Gees or ABBA. Just so fun, right? We were at that resort for, I think, 4 days. And it wasn't until the 3rd or 4th day that I realized that was the slowest elevator I had ever been on in my life.
But because it was such an amazing experience, you didn't realize it.
Exactly. It wasn't until I was like, wow, I've heard like 2 verses of Staying Alive and we're not at the 5th floor yet. And it was a really small elevator. So you would have to wait because it was one family at a time. Because, you know, even fitting 4 people with a couple bags in there was like totally maxed out. But I thought, wow, this is so brilliant. I've been on this elevator like 3 or 4 times a day for the past 3 days. And it never occurred to me how slow it is because it's an experience. So in the mortgage industry, there are a lot of slow elevators, right? There are a lot of things that maybe you're not going to be able to fix.
That's so
Right.
true.
There are things that you don't have ultimate control over. Like you might not be able to make that elevator go faster, but what you can do is make it more enjoyable, like make the ride better. You can turn it into a disco dance party. So looking at your customer's experience and not sort of passing the blame and saying like, oh, well, like that's all underwriting. I can't do anything about that. Or like, oh, well, I'm going to have to wait for that to come back. Like that's beyond my control. Nothing about your customer's experience is beyond your control. Absolutely nothing.
So important to realize and just to sit and chew on that and think about the experience we create. It's really our responsibility. The customer shows up to do what they want to do. In your case, go to Legoland. And if you're sitting and dealing with some processes, a slow elevator you're not in control of, let's make it as a positive experience as possible. This business is all about referrals. It should be. We do a terrible job of the mortgage industry in the referral side of our business, as you pointed out a little bit earlier. But what can mortgage professionals do to increase the number of referrals they receive? And give us an example of someone, if you can, think of one, of someone that's doing this much better than others.
Absolutely. So one thing that I think, well, let me start with this story. So I've worked with several huge brands over the years, including several large charities. And I had the privilege of working with Feeding America for several years. And when I first started working with Feeding America, one of the directors of the charity said, do you know the number one reason people donate? And I said, maybe they dealt with food insecurity when they were young. And she said, nope. And I said, okay, maybe because they've seen firsthand the impact of like a food pantry or food kitchen in their community that really matters. And she said, nope, try again. And I was totally stumped. I was like, I don't know, what's the number one reason? And she said, we always ask people why they donate. And again, without fail, overwhelmingly, the number one reason people donate is because they were asked. They were asked
Yes,
to do
it is.
People were like, yeah, I gave because someone asked me. I got something in the mail or somebody called me or there was an email. So people who've never worked in sales jobs have no idea how important referrals are. So I think a lot of times people are afraid to ask for referrals, or they're like, well, why would I need to? Obviously, this customer knows that I want referrals. They may not. Like sometimes it's that simple. Again, like we all have a million things going on. We're so busy. So the number one thing to do to make sure you get referrals is to ask for them. Make sure your customers know why they're important and start planting those seeds like early in the process. Like there will be times while you're working with that customer where you can say, you know, hey, thanks so much for having all your financial stuff together. Like you made things so much easier for me. I really appreciate it. I love working with customers like you. If you've got friends who are, you know, thinking about moving to a new place or looking for a mortgage, I would love introductions because it would be fantastic to work with more people like you. Like plant those seeds so that when you're asking for that referral or you're asking for that review at the end of the process, it's not like coming out of nowhere.
That is, there's so much in that I want to talk about, but I want to get to your book real quickly. Why is it that you wrote this book? You've been talking about Superfans. You talked about it 3 years ago on my podcast. It's been something that's been top of mind for you and on your heart, but let's get into the reason why you wrote the book.
Well, I wrote the book because I wanted to help people. I mean, that's really this, you know, sort of simple as it gets. Is
anyone who gets to know you, they know that that's what you're about. You're so passionate about people. You enjoy people. When I saw you at the Total Expert, happy to have them as one of my sponsors at their user conference in Nashville. You just radiate. You had a tribe, I mean, a posse around you, people that just are drawn to you. So you obviously are resonating and creating a powerful experience with people. And I know a lot of people struggle with that. So it's a great why, but tell us a little bit about the book. When we read that, what can we anticipate? What's the experience, to use your language, that you've intentionally created for us as we read your book.
Well, thank you for using the word experience and for saying so many kind things. I wanted to write a book that didn't feel like a business book. And part of the reason that it took me so long to write this book is because I wanted to make it special. I didn't want to just like throw a book together and put it out to have a book. I love books. I am, this was something that I wanted to get right. And I wanted to do justice to readers because I know a book is an investment. It's an investment of time. It's an investment of money. And I wanted somebody to feel like the time that they spent with me in a book was well worth it. So some of the fun things that I did with this book are print the whole thing in color. So it's not a black and white business book. It's printed in color. It's beautiful. It's fun to read. Every chapter title and all of the major headings are songs. So there's more than 100 song references throughout the book, which just makes it fun to read. There are a lot of stories from pop culture. It is very much a business book. It's about customer experience. It's designed to help bring customer centricity more to the forefront. It's designed to give a shared language to people. So if you, have a team that you oversee and you want to introduce some shared language and some shared metrics that you can use for everyone to get on the same page, the book does all of that, but it does it in a way that's really fun and accessible so that whether somebody has been in business for 50 years or 15 minutes, they can pick it up and say, okay, here are some things that we can change to be more customer centric and to create more of these superfan customers.
And it's being published and released today. So today,
yes, January 10th.
Congratulations.
So you can order it right now. It's available everywhere books are sold, including bookstores. So if anybody out here listening is in their car and they're driving by a Barnes & Noble or Books A Million, or maybe their favorite little indie local bookstore, go take a peek. Look for the blue book with pink stars.
Yeah, I love it. And it's going to leap off the shelf at you because it's just so fun. And it's a great experience. You wrote every word in this yourself. You didn't hire a writer. I thought that was impressive because I'm writing a book right now and I have looking at a blank page. I just stare. But you did that. Any tips on writing a book that someone's thinking, I want to write a book? What would you say is the key thing for doing so successfully?
I would say start a podcast instead.
I've done that.
I will say part of why it took so long for me to write this book is because I was probably overly critical of myself. I think I made it take too long. The book is about 60,000 words and I wrote close to 150,000 words for this book. So there's a lot that didn't make it in the book. And because of that, there are a lot of bonus resources and things. So throughout the book, there's a URL that I direct people to over and over again to get some of the extra resources that didn't quite make it into the book, but are hopefully really helpful. But I would say before you sit down to write your book, think about who it's for and what you want them to get out of it, and use that as your North Star, because there are going to be things like, there are so many things that I had to cut that I would have loved to have had in there, like cute stories about my kids or things that were important to me personally. And when I came back to it and said, is this going to help my reader make more money, create more super fans? If the answer wasn't like an obvious slam dunk yes, then I took it out, because again, I wanted to be a thoughtful and respectful curator of the time that a reader is giving me to spend with this book.
Good. That's so point. There's some principles in that we can apply to everything we do. It should be not about us. It should be about the person that we're working with. That's our customer. So it's good stuff. I can't wait to get my copy of the book. It's ordered and it'll be here and I'm going to dive into it. And we'll got to have you back. Thank you so much, Brittany. If they want to have you come and speak, anyone who's listening wants you to come and speak to their organization or just talk with you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Well, thank you, David, for asking. I'm Brittany at BrittanyHodak.com. That's my email. So you can come to the website, you can send me a message, and I would love to talk about creating super fans.
That's excellent. I encourage you to do that. Have her come and speak. I listened to her speak at a Housing Wire event. It was so good. And that was what why I had her come to the podcast 3 years ago. And so good to have you back, Brittany. I can't wait to read the book and have you back and talking more about it. Let's bring some of your success stories on the podcast next time. Let's get some folks to join you that have been impacted by your book. I think that'd be a good next one.
I love that. I'm in.
All right. Perfect. Thank you so much for being here.
You've been listening to Lykken on Lending, a weekly mortgage market update with your host, David Lykken of Transformational Mortgage Solutions. Join us next week, and thanks for listening.